Hello everybody. We're continuing our little discussions about the Middle Ages. We've got a question up here on the board that I want you to think about. But first of all, I've got to explain a word to you, and the word is famine. Famine means when people experience widespread hunger, lack of food across a wide territory, like in a country or in a region. That's called famine. There's not enough food for everybody to have enough to eat to keep them from being hungry. So here's a question I want you to think about. I think it's kind of interesting in the Middle Ages. How did improvements in farming cause famine? Because wouldn't you normally think that improvements in farming would mean there'd be more food to eat? So talk to the people around you about why you think, and because this is really what happened, the improvements in farming really did cause widespread famine. How could that be? So talk to people around you about why that might happen. So in the 1300s in Europe, they were experiencing famine. There was not enough food to keep everybody fed. So what would be some results of that? What would happen? And also it'd be interesting for you to do a little research on your own, because there are places in the world today that are experiencing famine. And there's lots of reasons why. Whenever you have too little food production, or if food is not getting distributed to people that need it, then you have famine. Mr. Rest, there's another reason for famine. If there's too many people for the amount of food. So, two things I want you to think about. What would that feel like to be experiencing famine? How would that make you feel? And the other thing is, on your own, do some research and find some areas of the world that are experiencing famine right now at this very moment and see what some of the causes are. We'll be back with another question for you in just a minute. Okay, so we were talking about famine in Europe, which was a big problem. Then there was also some other things going on. So when you're not getting enough food to eat, you're not healthy, and the people in the Middle Ages did not eat a wide variety of foods anyway. So we may think that they were not particularly healthy. But then something came along that was really bad. They called it the Black Death. And I'd like you to do some research on that and find out why they called it the Black Death. But this was an epidemic, and an epidemic is anytime you have widespread, one particular disease is being caught by lots and lots of people, and over a wide period, territories, countries are infected, whole continents are affected. And then we even have this word called pandemic, which I find interesting that I've heard that used a lot lately. But a pandemic describes when major parts of the world, maybe even the whole world, is affected by a disease. Now remember, what did the middle-aged people know about diseases? So talk to your people around you for a minute and see if you can figure out what the middle-aged people might have believed about the cause of disease and how to cure it. And we'll come back in a minute. Okay, so people did not really understand what caused disease in the Middle Ages. They would try to put it on different things that they could actually see, like certain people or certain groups of people, or in the case of, they were superstitious in a lot of ways, believed in supernatural causes for disease, or if somebody had been a bad person, maybe they caught a disease. But here's what we know now about how the Black Plague was spread. First of all, you had all the trade, all the ships coming from Asia and the Middle East to European ports. And they would carry lots of different cargoes, including rats. And the rats also had something that they were carrying on them, something that was kind of hard to see, but they were full of these. So the rats were carrying little passengers on them. They were covered with fleas. And the fleas would, of course, go from one rat to another or to other animals and also to people, because fleas will bite people if they get an opportunity to do that. So again, the fleas were bringing with them some little passengers. Little passengers? What are you talking about? What could fleas be? Remember, fleas are bloodsuckers. What could fleas be bringing? Flea's pretty little. What could a flea be bringing? So the rats were bringing with them bacteria, and this particular bacteria is called Yersinia pestis, and this causes the disease which is known as the bubonic plague, or the Black Death. So that was what caused it. So talk about what you think the effects of this, and since people did not understand, and European cities in those days were pretty dirty and filthy, so rats flourished in those cities and the fleas flourished. So people were getting bitten by these rats or by these fleas, and also if you handle the dead body of a animal that's had the bacteria, you can also get the bacteria that way. So they didn't understand about washing their hands. They didn't understand about staying away from dead things. So talk about what you think the effect of this was. And they did have doctors back then, but how effective do you think the doctors were at treating this disease? So the Black Death, also known as the bubonic plague, which still is around today, and had read 750 cases of this worldwide this past year. That's the 14th century. How many people do you think were killed back then? So it's, if it's not treated, between 30% and 90% of people infected will die. So how many people do you think were killed during the Middle Ages? So we don't really know for sure, because the records were not real accurate back in those days, but we think that between 25 million and 50 million people died of the bubonic plague during the Middle Ages. So think about what that would do to your population. Okay, 25 million to 50 million would have been about 1/4 to 1/3 of the population. So in a group of 25 people, that means that between 6 to 8 people in this group right now would have died from the bubonic plague. So 1/4 to 1/3 of all the people in Europe probably were killed by the bubonic plague. So this is going to affect your feudalism. Think about how that would affect your feudalistic system if you lose 1/4 to 1/3 of everybody, all the classes. Also think about what this means to religion, because how would that make people feel about their religion to see 1/4 to 1/3, and remember, family members, friends dying from the Black Plague. Also, just all your social systems, how would that affect it if 1/4 to 1/3 of your people were dying, and economics. So a big impact on the Middle Ages. So you're going to see in the next video how the Middle Ages, the systems of the Middle Ages started to decline a little bit, and how you had the rise of some other things happening. So talk about the effect that you think the Black Plague had on all parts of life during the Middle Ages. And we will talk to you again next time. Have a great day.